Well, Gordon, buddy, this has been a long time coming. I am great. I am looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to it all week. He and I had a little chat on, what is it, Monday or Tuesday? We were trying to
Yeah.
work bugs. And I think he came up with a good solution. You're using your phone or you're using your computer?
Well, I'm using the laptop, but I'll focus in on the camera. My phone is so old, it wouldn't do this very well.
Okay.
So doing it the old fashioned way, but the computer's a little out of focus.
Okay, well, this is great. So everybody, I believe, in this group knows Gordon, past president, one of the founding members of our club. One of the few old farts left that we have. Stick around.
That's true.
And has been gracious enough to build us, as you can see from what's behind him. That's not a prop. That's his actual workshop. What is it? 23 rods so far?
I think it is more than that because we passed 25 a year or two ago.
Okay.
So,
and then all the club members who've bought rods from you, present company included, he's just a pleasure. And actually some rods, I had one that you restored for me and turned into a quite nice little casting bass rod, which was very cool.
The old ones sometimes turn out very nice.
It turned out quite well. I was very, very pleased. Well, tonight we have the quintessential expert Mickey Finn tire. You've probably tied close to half 1,000 of these, at least 500 by now.
There have been a lot.
So Gordon, would dazzle us, please. It's all yours.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll go ahead. Tonight we're tying the Mickey Finn, and like me, it's over 100 years old. The Mickey Finn came about back in the 19th century and was originally named after the tire, a Canadian tire, Langevin, and then got notoriety as the assassin and the Mickey Finn somewhere around 1937. I've fished this and it's great for all sorts of kinds of flies. And so since it shows up on the list for the tie-a-thon, I have tied pretty much 100 a year for quite some time. And I always seem to end up tying 100 or more of them and giving them to tie-a-thon and then giving away all of my excesses. So I never seem to have them these days. So I've put together this tying and I've tied up another couple of dozen. So I now have some more to fish. So originally, a couple of things about the materials. It's a pretty simple fly. I like the streamers. I like fishing streamers and some of the traditional streamers. And so you can see this is a traditional bucktail, and the remains of one I basically, I can get a couple of hundred Mickey Fins out of a bucktail. This one's a regular one. And what I wanted to point out, this has the crinkly fibers that make them a little more alive. This is one that I've only used for myself. This is a very, this is a fluorescent, and the fibers are very long and very straight. And when you tie with this, it almost looks like you're using synthetic. One of the things that I wanted to mention is when you get bucktails and some of these natural materials, this one was so oily that it all stuck together. So, but washing that in dish detergent and drying them really made this fluffy and made it really good to tie with. I've also tied one that I'll show you with since Hunter was talking about the lack of availability of natural bucktail, I tied a couple of them with this natural fiber. And as you can't quite imagine, the fiber is really hard to deal with. And but it does a pretty good job. I also tied a couple that I'll show you with this synthetic, the faux bucktail. Unfortunately, I can't find it in red, but as any fly tire that has some inventive spirit, I use a magic marker and I can, when I take the piece, I can color this red so it comes out pretty well. So I'm going to switch to the camera, and I'll try to show you how this is done. Very few materials, and I'm going to use size 4 hooks. They're going to be 6 extra long, and so these are the hooks that I'm using. And then I'm going to use a large tinsel because these are larger hooks. I'm going to use the large tinsel, the oval tinsel, and then I'm going to use a size 12 of the gold and silver mylar tinsel. So the hook and those kind of things, that's about all you need for this. So I will switch to the camera and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so this is, let me turn on the light here. I was playing with backgrounds to see how you could see things best. This is one that's a little traditional. It's got the deer, the bucktail, but it's got the kind of the original eyes made out of the jungle cock. So normally I don't use that very much, even though jungle cock is now available. I still like to preserve that. This when I was using those synthetic fibers, this is kind of what happens with those very fine synthetic fabric. And so you've got to trim these, and you've got to actually tie them a lot thinner than with less material. This is the that crinkle fiber, the EP fibers. So that's a little bit different. The straight new fibers comes out a very straight wing. The problem with this, it's very hard to keep the red and the yellow separate, so you can see that that line in there. So I still like the natural materials, so that's what I'm going to tie, but I'm going to be tying it with a little bigger head as well as putting the eyes on it. So this is not directly the traditional fly tying. Any of the techniques and the way you tie this will also do the things like the black nose dace, which is also a great pattern for smallmouth and pretty much anything, including trout. So I'm using a Norvise. So it's something that I picked up, and I had to mount it off of my table because with the video camera and things, the table wouldn't come out right. I couldn't get the cameras right. So I'm going to start by putting the hook in the vise. Any questions about any of the things I've talked about?
Not yet.
Okay. So I'm going to start back. I'm going to start about a
Gordon,
hook eye.
One
Yeah.
question, how about the fishability of the different materials?
The only one I know about is the natural with the crinkly fiber. I haven't tried the others yet. The straight fibers would be very, very smooth in the water. I don't think they would stir up much waves or displacement of the water. So I don't know how they would fish. The ones with the artificial fiber, the EP fibers, I have a feeling that you'd have to do something to make them sink, because they're not going to absorb the water and they're not going to gain weight. So you might have to bulk up the head in order to get the fly to sink. So, but I haven't tried that. It was just because of the discussion last week, I picked some up and tied a couple up in the with the different fibers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my jam knot, and I'm going to place this so that this is about a hook eye behind, and my jam knot's going to be about a hook eye length, so that I have plenty of room to tie the wings on. And then just to give it to something to grip. Now with the Norvise, typically I would just spin the vise, but that's a little hard to keep track of when I do that. So I'm going to do it by hand here. When I'm tying 100 of them, it helps a great deal to just spin the thread on up and back, and then also spin the tinsel on. So the next thing I'm going to do is take the oval tinsel, and because you go through a lot of this, I'm going to tie this on the top so it keeps the hook gap straight. and I'm going to wrap this on the top. Because I'm not using metal tinsel, I'm not going to be real concerned about, you know, the smooth body and that sort of thing. All that'll sort of come out in the wash. And I have a place on my vise head, you know, I don't know if you can see it, that I know that if I cut this off, I can come out with the right amount of material. So in doing hundreds of these, I have found certain places that I can move the thread and move the material. So when I cut it off, I have enough to finish the fly, but I'm not wasting a lot. Normally, when I tie this tinsel in, I'm going to put the gold side out and I'm going to put it on the side of the hook. Now, right now, so that you can see it, I'm going to put it on your side so you can see it and make it a little harder for me to do it. But I would normally put this on my side so I can keep track of it. And I'm going to run it along the side of the hook. And you have to be careful with this because it's so smooth. Whoop. So it's so smooth that it will pull out very easily. I just move that and take it out of focus.
No, you're good.
Oh, good.
Okay. So this part's pretty easy. I'm going to try to focus that a little bit better. All right. So, and with this, made a little stand there. Now, what I'm going to do is to make a smooth back. I'm going to bend this straight over so it creases, and now the silver side is up. And then I'll release this and I'll just, now when I get going, I'll just spin this thing and it'll just wrap it right up. But so I want to tie this and tie it off on the bottom. And I'm using a bobbin which is now screwed up, which only happens here. Just because I'm tying this on camera, I've recognized the fact that that's when your thread gets cut. So I have 3 extra bobbins ready to go. This is an automatic Norvise bobbin, which I really like because I can spin this thing up and I can just take up all the slack on it. And whoop.
That's why you have to tag in.
What's that? Yeah, I cut that off before I put the, okay. So we're going to do that again. That was so bad. This only happens when you do this on camera, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's recorded.
You're
Yeah.
right, exactly. I'll get rid of this. I knew this was going to happen. I was prepared for almost anything but that.
That's all right, Gordon. This is the way we all tie anyway.
Yeah.
Why? All right. So we'll tie this back in. Let that hang. I'll grab one of my emergency bobbins. Okay. So I'll catch it around. I'll have it underneath there. Now, what I was using was a relatively heavy black thread. It's, I think, a 140 denier on my Norvise bobbin or Norling bobbin. because this is the perfect opportunity to get rid of your old threads that you don't want to use anymore. And so if you want a small head though, you want to use the smaller thread. This is an 8/0, which I have no idea how that fits with the denier measurement system, but it's an 8/0 thread.
It's roughly about 70 denier.
It's a what?
It's roughly about 70 denier.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. Now, I like to reverse wrap this oval rib, and what I do is I will bring it around behind and make a solid oval on the back before I begin forward. And what that does is it protects the back. It also gives a nice solid area where you're not looking at tie-offs or gaps and that sort of thing. And if you reverse wrap it, now you're going and you are covering up maybe any of the little gaps that you had in the first line of tinsel. So I'm just going to take this up to the head and I'm going to take it underneath. So one of the things that I've found over the years of doing this is if I take it and I put a wrap right across the top at the back of the head, so it's right back here, then when I tie the wing, if I'm using the synthetics or those really straight fibers, what it's going to do is it's going to give a little kick up like a thread bump or a dubbing bump. And it'll help the wing kick up a little bit. I know, and I'll tie this off. Now that I don't have the automatic bobbin, I have to manually bring this up. Take a couple of wraps. I'm going to tie it underneath. Flip that off. That'll give that nice smooth top to the fly. So I'm going to use the regular material. And since this is bucktail, I'm not going to stack it, but I'm going to take some of the fibers, and you know, it's always the thing, the size of a matchstick or whatever, just going to take off, cut them right down by the skin. And what you'll see is all of the different fibers. So I'm going to take these top fibers, the longest ones, grab those, and I'm just going to restack them. Just pull them together and take the longest fibers, take the short fibers out, and the real long ones I'm just going to pick out. And the beauty of the bucktail out this far is it's not going to flare very much. You still have to be concerned about it if you tie longer wings, but on a size 4, this gives me a pretty good wing. I want this to be maybe 25% longer, and I want to pick out any of these really long stray fibers. So I'm going to measure the wing. If you watch some of the videos, they cut this off, but I like to bring this around, and I'm going to start my wing tie right at the back of that thread base. So here's you can see the hook eye up here. I'm going to start it back here, a couple loose wraps. Now I'm going to tighten it down a little bit in front of those. And the reason I like to leave this is because then I can look at the wing, and I can make sure that the wing is directly on top of the hook. And if I need to, I can grab this and I can maneuver it around so that it's right on top. From here, I'm going to take this and just cut that off. When you cut this off, a lot of times the wing, if you don't hold the wing, it will cant to one side. So if I hold that and I cut this, I get a nice angle to the head, and then I build a thread base, which is going to be the support for the rest of the wing. Now, when I'm tying these for the tie-a-thon, I like to keep these nice and solid. And so I'll apply a little bit of the head cement to each of the layers of the wing. And that'll hold it together, because this stuff can be kind of slippery. The synthetic materials are very slippery. So Okay, so that gives us our first layer of the wing. And so there's going to be a red, a yellow, a black, and then a larger red. I mean, a larger yellow. Hang on there. A yellow, a red, and then a larger yellow. So when you cut this off right here at the wing, again, you can have a lot of extra material, and then you can remove as much as you don't need. But again, I'm going to manually align those tips. So I have this out. Now, is this? So they're aligned out here. And I'm going to remove all of these long fibers. And I'm going to remove the short fibers. And then this part is too big. So I'm going to basically take about half of that out of that wing piece. All right, so here's my red wing. It's going to go on top. And so what I'm trying to do is keep these separated so you can see the distinct sections of yellow, red, and then yellow. So you have that that color difference. Okay, so there I'm on top, and I'm going to check it to make sure that it's straight on top of the hook. I'm going to cinch this down in front of those initial wraps and then trim this off again. This is where you tend to cut your thread. So a lot of times it helps a lot to get your ½ inch in up here before you finish wrapping it.
So Gordon, question?
Yeah.
Proportions, are the first bundle of yellow and the bundle of red basically the same size?
Yes, they should be the same size, and the top part of the wing is supposed to be about double the size. Again, depends on how big you want the head, but those measurements work out pretty well. But the first and second layers are supposed to be about half the size each of the top. So here I've got this. One of the things that helps as you're trying to make a smooth head, you can do a figure 8 over any red or yellow that's appearing in the front. Sort of figure 8, get it across the front here, and then move that back, and then trim off any errant. Okay. So now with the glue in there as well, the enamel, it also holds that all together. So now I have my final wing piece, which should be thicker than the first two. It should be about the same size as the other two combined. And so when you're cutting it, you can take a pretty big batch, and because you can pull it out and make it smaller. So I'm going to take those out, realign this. I'll take the smaller ones out and any long errant ones out. There we've got one long red that showed up. All right. And so each of these is going to be about the same length. There's not going to be really a taper. Sometimes you think about wanting to have a taper on some of the other kinds of flies. These are all about the same length. So I'm going to lay this in on top. Oh, first thing I need to do, I'm going to bring my thread back to the back of the head, because that's my tie-in point. That's where I initially want to anchor this. So that's measured there. I'll take a couple of wraps. Now, since this is the thinner thread, I was counting on using the thicker thread so I could build up a bigger head. and we can put eyes on this. On these, I'm a big believer in the eyes on these and the black-nosed dace when fishing for smallmouth and that sort of thing. So again, I'm going to put a little head cement right up on those fibers to let it blend in and lock those fibers down. So now the head is getting, so I can make very small heads, or I can make little bulkier heads in order to put eyes on them. And that's what I'm doing here. So I'm going to go in front. I don't know if you can see this, but I'll come around back and then I'll come across the tapered front so that it doesn't keep sliding down, down to the hook eye. And I keep that hook eye clear. But I want to cover all of these. Now, I'm sure you all know the trick. If you have some gaps, you can always use a magic marker to close those up. So I'm just going to put a couple of half hitches in the front. You can whip finish if you want, but there's going to be so much glue on here that it's not going to really matter. So there's the basic fly. And on this one, I'm going to take some eighth inch eyes. Let me see if I can, and I'm going to put them on there. And then I haven't been very successful keeping them on there unless I use the new UV glues. You could epoxy them in, but that's a big problem. So I'm going to put one of these, and these are a little bit easier if you have a larger thread and your head's a little bit bigger. Now for the Tyathon, I do not put eyes on those, but for the ones I want to fish, put those on there. Okay. And then this is the thin UV glue. Put some on the top. Separate that. And the other thing that happens is you drop your tools. So I'm just going to make sure that's completely covered and over the eyes. And then hit that. And it creates a very, very durable head. And it's got the eyes that are going to sparkle. And I think with the reverse wrapping of the tinsel, it gives a little more flash for smallmouth. And I fished this as well as the black-nosed dace for smallmouth and bass, panfish. I haven't fished it very much for trout in the last 10 years. So, but they've always worked really well for me. And so it's been great tying a bunch of them up for me. So I have them and can use them this summer. Any questions?
No.
Have you ever tied those on a shorter shanked hook?
I have not, because I like the longer shanks on the streamers. You know, I like the Carrie Stevens, and those are 8X and longer. You can, this is a size 4, you can tie these down to size 8 and 12. But if I'm going to use them as an attractor, I tend to like the larger and longer hooks. I just like the way they look. You certainly could. And they recommend in the different books and things, they recommend anything from 4X to 8X. But these 300s are 6X and they're heavy wire, so they work out quite well for this.
So I assume with all the metal, they keel pretty,
They what?
I said, I assume with all the metal, they keel pretty well.
Yes. And with the larger head that has the, it's hard, it's going to sink better than, if you have all this material and a very small head. Not quite the same as a bead head, but it gives a little more sinking, so it's a little more below the surface.
But very castable.
Yes. Not very wind resistant at all. So that's the issue with a lot of the pike flies and the musky flies that I'm looking at with our new place in Upper Wisconsin. There's a lot of wind resistance, not a lot of weight, but a lot of wind resistance with those things. So this one doesn't have that problem.
Well, that's a beautiful job, Gordon. Thank you very much.
You're
Gordon,
welcome. Good.
Gordon, I've got a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Whenever I try to tie these, I have a problem with the bucktail trying to come around the hook shaft on my first layer, and it totally buries the ribbed wrap on the hook shank.
Okay.
Is there any tricks to keeping the bucktail that far up on top of the hook shank we can use?
Yes. Well, and that's what I was. Let me grab another hook real quickly. Where's my open bag? I order these things by the hundreds, so all right. I don't use the UV glue very often, but man, I love the fact that it's instantly dry. So, okay, so when you create the basic body, and I'll just do something real quickly here. Okay, so I have a thread base, and then normally I would have the tinsel and the rib, which would be over here. And so the key, grab some bucktail. When you get this all lined up, it's just like when you're stacking deer hair instead of spinning deer hair, is when you put this on top of the hook, you've got to hold it on top of the hook. And then you make your first wrap in the back, the very back of your eye and your tie-in point.
Okay,
so this is
a pinch wrap.
So it's trapped. Here's my eye and my jam knot. I'm at the back of my jam knot, which is about a hook eye length long. So I've got a couple of loose wraps, medium tight, and then I can bring it up and hold it on top of the hook. Okay, so I'm holding it, I'm not letting it spin. And then I'm moving and tightening in front of those first couple of wraps. Okay, and this is the thing that I like. By leaving this front end long, I can hold this and I can keep pulling it back on top of the hook until I'm ready to cut it. And then tie that down. So I haven't allowed it to spin. I've held it on top of the hook. So that, if you do that for each of the, now I didn't trim this very well, but it's that these first couple of wraps back here are just to hold it in place. So you make 2 to 3 wraps here, and then you recenter it on top and hold it, and then your tighter wraps are coming forward. And so that will hold it on top. You've got to do the same thing, and it gets a little harder on each layer that you put on top. But if you just hold it on top and wrap it forward, it'll all stay there on top of the hook. And that's also where I was mentioning the oval tinsel. If you make that last wrap of oval tinsel right under here, it's sort of like a thread dam or a dubbing, a dubbing ball for other kinds of flies, and it'll hold that up and keep it from spinning, but it'll also hold it up and it won't hide your all that tinsel and ova you put on there.
Oh, fantastic. No, that explains it very well. Thank you, Gordon.
You're welcome. When you get the dimensions right, they're a lot of fun to tie. That is, here it is. You know, you go through this thing about big as a matchstick. Nobody knows what a matchstick anymore is. You know, you always talk about a wooden match. Well, you know, roughly you start out with that, and then you take a bunch of it out. But the wings are relatively thin, and you don't put a whole lot of bulk on them. So, but then you put the red on top, and then, you know, but I'll just show one more on there. Of course, I should have put several pairs of scissors here too, so when I drop them, I didn't have to bend over. So same thing with the red. I'm gonna get rid of the long ones. In this case, get rid of the short ones. So now again, you have to take your thread back to that very beginning. So it is back at the beginning of your tie-in point. And you bring up, line it up, and then you hold it, and your first couple of wraps are just to hold it down. And then I like to be able to grab it and pull it up, and then I'll tighten it as I go forward. Go forward a little bit, so now it's tight. Clip that off. Finish, and you can make that nice and solid, but you're holding that while you're wrapping it so that it can't twist, and it'll just mount right up on top there. Now I wish I'd put the tinsel body on, because this fly is almost done.
It might fish good just like that.
Yeah, you know, these are perfect colors. I don't know how many people use spinning rods, but one of the, you know, the big colors is the fire tiger rapalas or rapalas. You know, you've got the orange and green, orange and yellows. You know, they're all big perch colors and really fishy attractor patterns. My understanding is during World War II and a lot of later, the survival kits for everything from airmen to the soldiers, a lot of the survival kits had Mickey fins in them. So they got the name Mickey fin from a writer, guy named Gregory Clark, who published an article in the late 30s after Valentino died, supposedly from being drugged with a Mickey fin, and so prior to that they were known as the assassin, but the word hadn't gone out because he had not published or written an article about them. And apparently in the first year they sold over Mills and Company and Weber of Wisconsin fly tires sold like 1 million or 1.3 million of these things right away. So my understanding is they were so good they were put in the military survival kits. I never saw one there, but all right. Any
I really enjoy watching tie these classic flies. It's very interesting to me we had the Mickey fin here, we had the Adams earlier on, and I just really appreciate looking at some of these classic flies because there's a reason they're classics, and that is they catch fish.
Yeah. They worked then, they work now. Well, and I like the natural materials. I like, some of that history that you're describing is just, it's fun to be part of that. So I started fly fishing in the Northeast, and woolly worms were like the precursor to the woolly buggers and those kind of things. And the woolly worms caught fish when we first went to New Zealand in '88, and they caught fish when we went back in 2010. So they have their own special patterns, but there's just something simple about those patterns. They work for maybe in their simplicity.
Nicely done, sir.
Yep.
Okay.
Well done.
Yeah, well done. Enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Now we'll
thank
go back to a dozen or so.
The good news is these are still available from Jeremy's Fly Shop and DuPage Fly Fishing, and they're only about $6 a pop. So get yourself some colors.
Yeah, I'm gonna head over tomorrow. I've got a yellow one, but I don't really have a good red one though.
Now, just something, if you look at the underside of these, if you don't want to go $6 for one, go with somebody else, and you can split off. The red goes up either side. So you can actually see it when you look up closely at these. You can take a razor and split the skin on either side and each have half of a bucktail. And so you can cut your cost by half, but they're only about $6 a piece. I would suggest that if you get one, make sure that it looks really clean, and washing it in dish detergent and then drying it doesn't take very long at all. It makes an amazing difference in how the fibers float, move, and how they're separated.
I guess you better not put that in the dryer or get caught doing that.
Don't put it in your washing machine with the whatever. I don't think these are color safe.
Probably not. Now the black dace, what colors is that? It's the same fly basically, isn't it?
What's that? Oh yeah, that it's the same fly. This is the black-nosed dace.
Black-nosed dace, yeah.
And it's just a white, black, and brown. And
Okay.
these are great for smallmouth. Let me turn the camera back on. You can see a little bit better. Whoop. So it's the same exact process. You have three colors that instead of yellow, red, and yellow, it's white, black, and brown. Represents a little minnow or bait fish of some kind. And they are terrific. A lot of fun to fish, especially with the eyes. You can also do these with, you can put eyes on there with paint, fingernail polish, take a dowel and use a pencil sharpener to make different sizes and put a white or a yellow base and then a black pupil on it, and then cover that, and it'll do the same thing. But early on, I fished a lot of these, and these you can make really small. So, but the same basic thing is basically the same process.
Okay, looks good.
Yeah, it does look good.
George,
right.
your material handling tips here were the best.
Yeah.
I think all of us have taken a shot at this, but your handling tips going forward are going to be helpful.
That's the problem. I always had time though. Was the different colors of bucktail would always run together after a while. So he showed me how to get around that now.
Yeah,
So
well,
and those up, hopefully I can keep them all separate.
right, and that key is, as you flatten this a little bit, but it's tying those materials in individually and really wrapping it down, making good solid head, holding it so it stays on top.
Right.
You'll get that lateral line look to it, and but about 500 flies later, they're getting much better.
Yeah, tie flies will save you all kinds of money, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. But all the money went for a good cause. It all went to, or most of it went to the tie-a-thon. So, but all right.
Very good.